I pledge to stay drug-free.
I plan to stay drug-free.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
I pledge to be drug-free.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Expose Under the Sun, sponsored by the Detroit Native Sun newspaper. And I'm your host, Darwin Griffin, and I've got a very special guest, Mr. Brandon Bryce. I probably don't have to mention his name because so many of you have probably seen him throughout watching and listening to the media. He's on the radio and he's also on TV. So he will be my special guest today, and we're going to talk a little bit about the political arena that's going on, not just here in the state, but also in the nation, as well. So our show is live. If you'd like to call into the station, our call-in numbers are area code 313-868-0342, 313-868-0351, 313-868-4336. Website is www.tv33whpr.com, and you are watching us from the awesome cities of Highland Park under the auspices of the Honorable Mayor Hubert Yap, as well as the Honorable Mayor Mike Duggan of the great city of Detroit, Michigan. And just wanted to say, too, that before we get started, just want to express our condolences to the family of Miss Dorothy Tankersley, and that is Sharon Full and Fabulous Dumas's mother. So again, just want to extend our condolences to the Dorothy Tankersley family as well. But let's get started. We got a lot of things that's going on, throughout the political arena, and I think he probably needs to put another hat on because he's kind of almost like that political go-to person that it seems like one of the TV stations, when they need somebody to talk about the political climate in and around the country, they usually go to my special guest. And again, his name is Brandon Bryce. Brandon, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Darwin, for having me.
And let's get started. Brandon.
All right.
We got a debate coming up tomorrow.
We do.
What do you think are going to be? Do you think we'll get the same kind of fireworks that we had from the debate last week with the presidential candidates?
Well, Darwin, I think we'll have a very different debate. Last week was bananas. I mean, I thought I was watching Ringling Brothers. It was a circus. I mean, none of the issues got talked about or discussed. Hopefully,
why do you think they didn't?
Well, some people blame the president. Some people blame Chris Wallace. Some people blame Joe Biden. I mean, the reality is issues didn't get discussed. And so I think this week you're going to have a very different kind of debate because you have Mike Pence is a very soft-spoken kind of guy, and then Kamala Harris typically is more of an academic, if you will. So I think the conversation is going to be very different. I think what you will see is one candidate is going to talk about why we need to support the Trump-Pence ticket and support the economy. The other candidate is going to talk about what are some of the issues surrounding rioting and police brutality. And so it's going to be one candidate is going to focus on more social issues. The other candidate is going to focus on more economic issues.
So if there was something that you would have wanted to have seen more of in the presidential debate, what would you have wanted to have seen more to come across when Trump and Biden were debating?
You know, Darwin, I wanted the presidential candidates, the two guys who are going to be the leaders of the free world, I wanted them to talk about what's their plan. Neither candidate talked about their plan. I always say it reminded me, Chris Wallace almost looked like a school teacher trying to break up a kindergarten fight. I mean, that's how bad it was when you talk about the fact that issues didn't get talked about. And right now, I mean, the president, he's just coming off of COVID. That's an issue right now where people are saying, maybe now, I thought it would have happened under Herman Cain when he passed, but folks are taking COVID much more serious now than they ever have before. And so I think the challenge now is how do we get back to a level of civility where people are talking about issues. And so some people say we don't need any more debates. I disagree with that. I think we could have hired Sandman off of the Apollo to break up that fight. It would have been much better than mutant mics. But the reality is we've got an opportunity, Darwin, to hear from the next leader of the free world. Could be the president, might be Joe Biden. We don't know. I'll tell you what was disheartening is that out the gate, I heard Joe Biden talk. He basically called the president a clown. There was some insults up front. I don't think that was very presidential. But then the other side is, I heard the president talk about Joe Biden's son, talk about drug addiction. That was not presidential either, because the reality is, through the grace of God, we all are two steps away from that issue, or we all have family members who might have someone struggling with addiction in our family. And so I think that's going to hurt the president. But I also think that, when the president talked about Antifa, the fact that Joe Biden said that Antifa was nothing more than an idea, that shows he's out of touch, because the reality is, look at what's going on in Minnesota and in Portland and in Seattle, where we've got cities that the police are no longer functioning there. I mean, it's literally the Wild Wild West, to the point where the federal government had to come in. The federal government should never have to come in. That's what police, that's what the state is for. And so I think that, what you saw is two gentlemen out of touch, and the American people, in my opinion, were the losers that night because our questions didn't get answered.
Now, do you think, because I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and we were talking about whether or not if one moderator panel was better than a multiple moderated panel. Like, whereas you had said Mike, in terms of, say, Mike Wallace, or Chris Wallace, rather, should just do the presidential. But my understanding, the vice presidential debate is going to be moderated by multiple individuals. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I'm hearing. I mean, the reality is, I think, you've got two very strong personalities. Chris Wallace, I think, I've been a moderator. He tried to be the best moderator he could be. But the issue is that people need to be very clear. A moderator's job is to ask the questions and hold people accountable. Your opinion is not important when you're a moderator. And I think that's where people, there were a couple times where Chris Wallace kind of threw his opinion in there and counter, and I think you got to be very careful with that. Now, we all know the Donald is a very interesting person to control, when it comes to the public eye. Some people have said that maybe this was a spectacle. I don't know. And so I think, the next debate, I think the Trump campaign's folks are saying to him, this can't happen again, because I'll be honest, I don't think the ratings really helped either candidate, and I don't think it necessarily hurt or helped. So the ball didn't really move forward. The bottom line is the debates. Who wins the debates will go to who actually asked and answered the question.
Well, I think the thing is that, as you said about Antifa, that the president may have been out of touch when it came down to understanding about Antifa, but the obvious was that he was in touch when it came down to the Proud Boys, when he made the reference to them. And I think the thing is that when you look at the things that both candidates had to either gain or lose, it seemed like there was more that people were wondering, was it like 45 made a comment in the early part of the debate and said it's almost like they were ganging up on him. Like Biden and Wallace were, like, he was debating against the two of them as opposed to just debating against Biden.
Darwin, I watched the debate from start to finish. I had my popcorn and my old Redenbacher, sitting there, and had my Kool-Aid sitting next to, to my left. I didn't see it. I mean, I think as a moderator, the job of a moderator is to ask questions and hold candidates accountable. I think there were a couple times where Chris Wallace kind of threw his suggestion in there, and that was wrong. Did Chris Wallace and Joe Biden gang up on the president? I don't believe they did. The Proud Boy question was interesting because the Proud Boy founder is actually an African Afro-Cubano man who says that we're about nationalism, and we support the country. We're not a racist organization. Actually, they just came out in support with Black Lives Matter to talk about the fact that the media had them misconstrued. But that wasn't the important issue because people have opinions of different organizations, Proud Boys, whatever you call them. What was more important is when the president was asked that, the answer was no, I do not support white supremacy. The fact that that question got tap danced around, I think whether it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, folks should start asking some serious questions. That was a layup. That was actually meant to be an easy question, and the way it was responded could be questioned, should be questioned.
Well, it's going to have a lot of questions because he almost looked like a deer in the headlights when that question was asked, because it was almost like, who, me? And you know how sometimes, as you know, being in the media, sometimes if somebody asks you a question, you will use a stalling technique and just repeat the question again. But it's like, that's one thing that he said, that he repeated the question again and said, white supremacists, and asked, was he supporting? And he asked that question again, like he was stalling before he came up with an answer. And then there was the pause. Whereas like anybody else probably would have just said no.
Right. Well, and so here's the thing, Darwin. The president has responded to that question 33 times and has said no every time. What was concerning is that this was the time, and I'm an outside person looking in because I'm watching it. It was an easy question. Keep it simple, stupid. Do you support white supremacy? No.
Right.
End of story. Next question. The hesitation, I think, should be concerning. And I think his camp is saying, you got to come back from that.
Oh, yeah.
You got to come back because even though you supported the Platinum Plan, which is putting $50 billion back into the black community, good those are good things. Even though the president's been right on with prison reform, good things. But that issue, to me, that response could cost the election. This reminds me of something, Darwin. In 92, I believe, when Bill Clinton ran against Herbert Walker Bush. And remember, the African-American woman asked the question about, do you know the cost of milk? And at the time, Herbert Walker Bush looked at the question like it was a stupid question to say, why am I responding to this? And Bill Clinton cut him off and said, I can tell you the cost of milk. And what it showed is, it showed that there was a connection that people really understood that inflation was high at that time. 92 was, we were just coming off of somewhat of a recession. And so I think it's those questions, when you get a layup simple question, the answer is no, I do not support that. I'm hearing a lot of skeptics talking about, well, this happened and, maybe he didn't understand the question. It was a very simple question. Very simple question.
Now, who do you think then, as a result of the debate, who do you think gained or who do you think lost? Were there any people that gained any points, or were there any people that felt that one of the candidates lost some points?
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't think anybody gained any points that night. If anything, I think I think the president may have somewhat missed some opportunities. That layup question was one. I think the question to focus more on what the Platinum Plan was, he didn't really get a chance to talk about that, which is huge. I think there was some missed opportunities there. I also think from Biden's standpoint, I don't think Biden really addressed the issue of the economy. He talked about what the president isn't doing, but he didn't really give his plan for the economy. And so I think I don't think anybody gained. If anything, I think, like I said before, the American people lost because the real hard questions didn't get talked about that night.
Well, see, I was wondering because, when you looked at, just like you referenced before about the question pertaining to what somebody had to gain and what somebody may have had to have lost. But then when the president, and I know a lot of people said it was a low blow to mention about Biden's son, having the addiction. And it really, you could tell in Biden's eyes that question was really caught him off kilter.
Sure.
Because of the fact that, as you said, people are not that far removed from having somebody in the family that may have something going on with them.
Well, this is the thing.
But let me say this. But the point I want to really get at is that I think that there were some people that heard that statement that the president made and then heard the vice president's response to that question. And he may have got some people that may have been on the fence to say, I think I'm going to support that gentleman as opposed to support the current president.
Darwin, I actually don't disagree with you. I think anytime in politics, and any person running knows that, when in politics, your kids are hands off. The unfortunate thing is that, and I guess it's fortunate and unfortunate, the president's not a politician. He's a businessman. And so I think, the Wall Street mentality is basically anything goes and it's all about the bottom line. The sad part is that I don't think the administration realized that when you talk about drug policy doesn't just affect people who are on it. It affects families. This reminds me of the immigration issue back in California. I think it was 10 years ago, the Prop 187, where their focus was to be tough on illegal immigration. But they didn't realize those illegal immigrants had friends and family who were legal, who can vote. And so I think, when we start talking about drug policy should be one of those things very similar to education policy, where it almost should be a nonpartisan issue because everybody's impacted in some way, shape, or form by drug policy, whether it's you lost a loved one to an addiction, or whether you are dealing with somebody who is a spouse who's dealing with addiction. And that could be alcohol, that could be drugs. And so I think that was one of those situations where I don't think the president realized maybe what he was saying. Maybe the better question was talking about Vice President Biden's judgment when in saying, or the way I would have phrased it is in saying, if your son is doing business and he's dealing with this kind of money and he's using your position for his own personal gain, then that is a concern. But I think it's really, and it's not what you say, it's what people hear.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing that people were hearing. In some cases, people hear what they want to hear.
Right.
Rather than hear what's actually being said.
Right.
But so now we've got a vice presidential debate coming up. How do you think it's going to fare out?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. I think it depends on, if I were advising Senator Kamala Harris versus Vice President Pence, if I was Pence, I would say you want to focus on her judgment. You want to go back and talk about the things that the administration has done around incarceration issues. The fact that, her background, she's been one of the top cops and aggressive on prisoners and on crime in Oakland, California. That's actually that's actually a feather in the Trump-Pence campaign's hat. If I'm advising Senator Harris, I would say, go after the failure of COVID. I think that's a big one. Talk about the fact that, she's got to implement an argument that basically says that challenges is, are we ready? I mean, COVID is a given. But are we ready to deal with the crises of the economy post-COVID? In the president's hat, before COVID, the economy was actually doing fairly well. Now we've had COVID. So I think her argument has got to be, after COVID, are we ready to prepare an economy that goes back or makes it better than it was before COVID? And then the other thing is she's got to answer some tough questions about her role when she was a AG. Shockingly, African-American women support her, but African-American men do not. And so when you look at the actual numbers, those are things that are going to be interesting on both camps. If I were advising both, the different strategies that I would tell both to go to.
So now, do you think then, because I've heard today that there's a 14-point difference in the polls between the current president and the presidential candidate that's trying to take his seat. But the thing is that, what's your opinion about polls? I mean, because sometimes people get a false sense of security when they see that those polls have such a big divide.
Polls don't vote. You know, the late Isaac Robinson, who was a friend of mine, taught me that long. He said polls don't vote. Yard signs don't vote.
Right.
And what you see, what people are saying is going to be very different than what they are actually going to do in that voting booth. And so I would say, you know, we can have the decision, you know, don't ask me anything until 9 p.m. that night.
And you might not be able to ask
You might not be able to ask
because
then.
it might not be until 9 p.m. the following night, if not the following week.
But you know what? This is interesting because I've told folks, I have a feeling, Darwin. Now, remember I said this on your show. I have a feeling this election is going to be determined ultimately by the courts. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Because I think the thing is that even during the debate, 45 made a comment and said, when they asked him about, will you accept the results
Right.
of this election? And as he was saying, I don't think that there's going to be a result that's going to be given, probably not the night of the election, and it might not be the following night. It may be weeks after
Months.
the election. Correct.
Yeah.
So the thing is that there's a lot of mystery about this, but I think it's going to really get people to really kind of wonder about the casting the absentee ballots, going to the various different places to go and do the drop boxes and put your polls in the, you know, your ballots in the drop boxes. But is there anything that you, Brandon, think that might be any additional fireworks that may come from this election?
You know what? I think at this point, Darwin, first of all, I'm a big believer. If you can protest, you can vote in person. That's me. But I think people are pretty clear on who they're voting for.
Okay.
You know, folks are either going with Joe Biden or they're going with the president. I think the independents are still trying to figure that out. I once again say the economy, I think, is going to be just as important as an issue as far as COVID. The other thing is that, you know, we've also got to look at, you know, what else is going on in the world? You know, there's a lot of conflicts. You know, when we talk about the fear of dealing with the new normal, so mask mandates, tracking mandates, whenever you go to public places and now, you know, you have to be tracked. That's going to cause a new stir. So there are some much bigger issues that are going to happen in 2021.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll have to stay tuned.
All right.
Brandon Bryce, my special guest today. Thank you for coming on the show
Thank
today,
you.
Brandon. And
Thank you.
I guess we'll be watching to see on election night how this all pans out.
All right.
So again, Brandon, thank you for coming on the show today.
All right. Thank you.
But I just want to say that, you know, I really want to thank Brandon for coming on the show today. This is going to be a very, very interesting election. And the main thing, as Brandon and I will both tell you, regardless of what happens, make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure that you do get out and vote. It's imperative. Don't sit back and say, I wonder what could have happened if you didn't get out and vote. Some of you may have voted early. Some of you may still be waiting, as Brandon was saying, going to the polls on election day. But if you are going to wait and cast your ballot at the polling precincts, there are a lot of individuals that are going to be there. They've hired a lot of new people to come on board to make certain that there is nothing inappropriate that happens to your ballot. So please don't feel like your voice, your vote is not going to count. There's going to be hundreds of people that are going to be there in addition to make certain that your ballots are counted and are secured and that no anything inappropriate happens to a ballot. But I do want to say, if anything, make certain, get out and vote, encourage somebody else to get out and vote, and also transport your relatives, your neighbors that may have waited till the last minute to vote. take somebody to the polls. As Reverend Anthony says, take your souls to the polls, but take someone else with you to go and vote. And again, whatever the results are, this is going to be an election that's going to be one for the ages. And we, regardless of what happens, we are still all fellow human beings. We still have to maintain the civility. And whatever is going to happen, let's do what we can to make certain these next 4 years are going to be 4 years that some of us may be disappointed because of the results of the election, but it's not the end of the world. And we got through the past 4 years. We've got through other years that we may not have liked, but we are resilient, we are strong, and we are survivors. And we can get through whatever happens after this election as well. I do want to thank R.J. Watkins and Henry Tyler for allowing us on Tuesdays to be a part of your listening and viewing audience. I do want to say, too, just to give a shameless plug, I will be the MC for the Western Wayne County NAACP. They're having a fundraiser. It's going to be on October the 18th. And I do want you to go and, support. You can go on their website. This is the Western Wayne County NAACP. And my guest next week will be the president of the Western Wayne County NAACP. So we're going to talk a little bit more, about that. And also, too, just wanted to say that I'll be doing a fireside chat with none other than Detroit's own Lonnie Love, because she'll be the keynote speaker for that event. So you don't want to miss that. You don't want to miss next Tuesday, 2:30 to 3 o'clock. And if you would like to get an ad in the Detroit Native Sun newspaper, who sponsors our show, you can contact Ms. Valerie Lockhart, and her phone number is area code 313-457-5944, and that's to advertise in the Detroit Native Sun newspaper. And you can pick up a copy of the Detroit Native Sun newspaper at your local Kroger supermarkets. Again, want to thank my special guest, Brandon Bryce, for being my guest on the show today, and I hope that you will remember. Tell someone that you love them, and stay safe, and stay masked up.